All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. We are live. Brady, aka the War Hamster, here with my good friend and mentor, I think all things constitutional, Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution himself. We are going to be without Andrew the Citizen 1776 tonight. He is spending some family time. So we'll see if we can try to entertain y'all without him. Doug, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well. For a day, see, Friday is normally my relaxation day, and for a relaxation day, this day sure got busy, real fast. In fact, it got so busy I had to not do something I had planned on doing, which was head out your way to check out a particular space. I didn't get a chance to get out there because suddenly I've got some other things going on that I can't even mention on this channel. I will say that there's a gentleman as associated with First Month 6 Day a few years back, that thing, who appeared on the opposite side of the building after everything had happened to pray, and wound up in a conversation with him.
How dare he?
How dare he? Yeah, trying to overthrow things or something. But anyway.
Yeah, I've spent the entire week buried in spreadsheets, so I'm a little bit not as caught up on the current events as I normally am. But I'll see if I can try not to hold you back too much tonight.
Well, there's the wonderful thing about the bad guys being in office is it gives us plenty to talk about.
Yes, it does.
I was telling someone this earlier today that as much as I can't stand the current administration and the garbage they're pulling, they're good for business. And that's unfortunate because I'd rather be talking about the Constitution than the garbage that they're pulling. But nonetheless, sometimes we got to talk about the garbage they're pulling and Constitution together, or the lack thereof.
Well, the same thing mainstream media realized, with Trump. Once he got out of office, their ratings took a plummet because that's all they talked about for 4 straight years.
Right. Well, when it comes to what's going on, and one of the things I talked about on the radio show last week, and you and I have talked about, but we haven't talked about here. So let's bring this up. So let's start with this, just because it's something, even though it's kind of old news now, it's about a week and a half out. It is important because we need to understand the larger implication and what is meant in the Constitution and all of that jazz. And that is the CEO of J.P. Morgan says, and I'll see if I can find that article in a minute. Says that, because we're trying to save the planet, and we got to get things like wind farms and solar farms and all that stuff going, because we're trying to save the planet because everything's going to heck. We need to start seizing property. The sentence that caught my attention in this particular article, and this is from the Daily Caller by Brianna Lyman. And the fourth sentence in, it says, eminent domain allows the government to forcibly seize private property for public use as long as the owner is compensated. That is not what the Constitution says.
Did we not cover this last Friday?
Not here, I don't think.
I think we did because you weren't on Sunday and we didn't talk about it on Tuesday. So
all right, well, let's bring it up again anyway.
Well, it's fine. I'll repeat myself.
All right, we'll keep it short. Yeah, it's driving me nuts. I'm planning on doing a video on this. That sentence was written by a person who's supposed to be on our side. That's the reason why I think it burned my bacon. And this is something I didn't say last week. We've got a Daily Caller writer who writes that they're not quoting somebody. They're not referring to some other article. They wrote in their article, eminent domain allows the government to forcibly seize private property for public use as long as the owner is compensated. And it says in the Constitution twice, Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment, first for the federal, the latter for the states, that you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. So therefore, that alone tells you that the government cannot forcibly seize private property just as long as you're compensated. Well, then what does the clause about eminent domain in the Fifth Amendment at the very end of it actually mean? If they can't forcibly take it, then does that mean that the person can actually refuse and that the government can actually wind up at the end of the day without that property? Yes. unless there's due process. You're guilty, and that's a part of your punishment is to lose that property, and it's not excessive, punishment in violation of the 8th Amendment. Otherwise, yes, the federal government can say, hey, we need to get this property. What, they said no? Well, did they take our offer? Well, did you up it? Well, I guess we can't take it. That's the way it's supposed to be. Unless there's due process, they cannot take proper, well, they can and they do, but you know what I mean. Legally, constitutionally, there is no authority for the federal government to just forcibly seize property just as long as there's compensation. That's a false statement, and it's in the 4th paragraph of an article written by an alleged ally. It burns my bacon. And then some. What does it say? Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Oh, see, Doug, they just have to make sure they compensate them. That's not what it says. What is just compensation? Just compensation is what is just to the property owner, because it's already said twice in the Constitution, one time in that very amendment, you can't lose your property without due process. Therefore, if there's no due process, just compensation doesn't mean they can just take it as long as they give you compensation, because there's no due process. So that means you can say no. So what did they mean by just compensation? You go back to Mattis's notes. You go back to, a matter of fact, now I wish I would have looked this up because I was thinking about it. You go back to, I've got a set of volumes of something called the Founders Constitution. I'm not even sure. Oh, there it is. It's a 5-volume set where if I look something up, it'll give me all the letters and documents and legal briefs and everything else that is attached to that subject, up to like right around 18, I think 18 teens or something like that. But anyway, Madison's notes is the best source for this one. If you don't think the compensation is just, they can't take it. Just compensation means what you think is just. And if you think fair market value is just, fine, take it. If you think it's worth double that, don't let them take your property until they give you that. If you think it's priceless, they're walking away without your property from a legal constitutional standpoint.
Well, the precedent was set in the 1800s to ignoring the idea of just compensation. The most blatant example is what the railroad lawyers did. Mm-hmm. Once they decided they wanted a railroad to go through your property, they had all kinds of means of getting you to agree to really shady deals. And of course, the cattle wars saw the same thing in the Wild West in the late 1800s. But who knew government would abuse its power? Never seen that anywhere else, have you?
Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk it? Wow.
Speaking of government abuses of power, I was reading something right before we got on air, and I think I'm going to see if I can share that. I think you remember a couple months ago, there was this guy, John Thaler, out of Arizona, who was making a bunch of noise about how the cartels were involved with Arizona politics. They were laundering money and doing all that stuff for basically all the political favors going back and forth. And he got invited to the Arizona, I guess it was a Senate and House combined joint meeting, and he put all these accusations out there. Actually, it turned out to be his girlfriend, and everyone was very excited because they're very explosive allegations. And if they're true, it's a big deal. Well, apparently the woman who brought him, the representative, was Liz Harris. And now she's been expelled, or she's up for expulsion pending appeal from the House of Arizona. And Mark Fincham is one of the people throwing her under the bus. There's a couple of different theories out there about why Fincham is basically seems to be turning on his own people. He's the guy who lost as Secretary of State. I did meet him in San Diego. Didn't find him to be as affable as I had hoped, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, this is a big deal in Arizona, and there's a letter here from Harris Thaler Law. It's kind of addressing this, and I think if I can get this thing to zoom in a bit, I will share the screen and read through this letter. Tell you about what was going on there. Are you up to speed on this one?
No, I'm not.
We talked about it a bit on our Sunday night show with Alan. You weren't there that week, and I brought it up when the story had first broke, and I preached caution. And I came back the following week and said, yeah, the caution was merited. Nothing smells good coming out of Arizona right now.
All right.
But this will give you a little bit of background. There'll be some things to talk about, I think. This is from Thaler, the guy making the accusations. Although it's interesting, he's got a Las Vegas address on this. This is to the people of Arizona regarding Representative Liz Harris's ethics hearing and the improper release of text messages. During the course of November 2022 election vote count in Arizona, I was contacted by Mark Fincham, a candidate for the office of Secretary of State, regarding my firm's investigation into racketeering and corruption within Arizona, specifically within Maricopa County. So far, we follow. It makes sense. It fits the narrative. I shared with Mr. Fincham the conclusions reached by my office to date, and I shared with him issues my office was continuing to investigate. Over the next few months, Mr. Fincham and I spoke several times. At his request, I provided him with certain evidence regarding election irregularities, shenanigans. On February 18, 2023, Jacqueline Brager was contacted by Representative Liz Harris. Ms. Harris inquired about the investigation, specifically how it pertained to election. You know what? After a short exchange, Ms. Harris requested to meet with Miss Berger the following day. Ms. Berger met with Ms. Harris. I was not present. Jacqueline Brager is the woman who presented. That is this gentleman Thaler's apparently girlfriend, which matters because there is some backstory to this. In February 2023, my attorneys and staff discussed whether to accept Ms. Harris's offer to present the findings before a joint committee. Skipping ahead, over the course of the next few days, we communicated. Subsequent to the presentation, reporters surmised that Ms. Harris not only had a long-standing relationship with Ms. Berger, and me, but that we had discussed making a presentation before the legislature weeks or months prior. This was and is categorically false. So basically, Liz Harris is getting stripped of her office, and the accusations, including the Rhinos, are siding with the Dems to oust her from office. In March 1st, 2023, Mr. Fincham contacted me. He requested a teleconference. Moving on to the next, with certain elected officials on issues related to those Ms. Brager had presented. During the call, several members of my team, including my personal attorney, and I participated with Mr. Rapacki. At the start of, my attorney and I were assured that the call was intended to assist me and my legal team, and therefore any information I would share would be deemed work product and therefore confidential. So basically what happened, and I'll skip it over the rest, but basically what happened is there's a lot of, stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on in Arizona, Maricopa, behind the scenes. We talk about the Arizona Mafia, which was put together by John McCain and Janet Napolitano, but it is, it's dirtier than anybody knows. And that's what's going on right now. You're never going to get election integrity out of the state because there's too many sellout rhinos, and the Dems, they've got a grip on the executive branch right now. So the only thing we can hope for is Kari Lake's lawsuit continues to go forward, and that's getting tough.
Talking with Steve Tuminello from the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, and Steve lives in Lake Havasu. A gentleman that tours with him named Bob lives in a different part of Arizona, down in Maricopa County. And according to them, there are some things going on behind the scenes regarding Kari Lake that goes beyond just a lawsuit. Based on my conversations with them, most of which is something I can't really talk about, it is far from over. Now we've been hearing for years, that there's plenty of evidence. People should be going to jail, so on and so forth. And we've been waiting, and it hasn't happened. So I don't want to throw hopium in your direction per se and make promises that I can't guarantee will happen. But based on conversations I've had, it is looking very much like by the end of the year, or at least by the end of the election cycle before the next election, the exposure of criminal activities in Arizona will be at the surface and for all to see. Kerry Lake will be governor, and there'll be over 100 in jail. Now, once again, this is just speculation. I am not playing that letter after P in the alphabet deal. I'm not doing that kind of thing. I'm not, I don't want to necessarily be throwing hopium against the wall and you get all excited. But I do see movement based on my conversations with people who are on the inside that we haven't seen before. And it's regarding things that hasn't really happened before. Some of it has surfaced. Some of it is available for public, one of which, and this is also has national implications, is that the gentleman who was basically behind the writing of the programming to rig rig the thing. God, I gotta be careful here.
I told you I got my first strike on YouTube for my show Sunday night.
A guy named McDonald is active, has back doors to the programming, things like that. So we'll see what happens. Once again, all speculation. Still, you never know until it happens. And if those of you that know me well, you know that even when it comes to quote unquote conspiracy theories, I don't disagree that there are conspiracies. I think there's plenty of them. And I think a lot of them that are considered theories are not necessarily theoretical. However, I am one that kind of likes to research and make sure that all the ducks in a row and it makes sense. And, is it possible, as you have with your list, Brady, is it possible? Is it reasonably whatever lined up with things or whatever your questions are? But I kind of go through a similar kind of cadence, maybe not exactly the same way, but I go through a similar cadence because I'm expecting that it has to satisfy me before I'm willing to say, yeah, that's it. And, and there's a lot to it.
And that's why I preached caution. I'm glad I did about the Thaler, because our corner of the internet was very excited about that presentation in Arizona, but something about it smelled off right away.
Right.
And just for your information, I also have some sources on the ground in Arizona that are different than yours, and I'm hearing similar things. So I think we can have a little bit of confidence in that. But it brings up the big question is, let's say all the truth gets laid bare, which it has so many times over the last 7 years, and nothing's done about it.
Right.
The problem, and that comes down to what institution has both the power, the authority, and the desire to actually hold these people accountable. And we find that there's bad actors in all those choke point positions that keep that from happening. Yeah. And sooner or later, something's going to get through. And we're seeing that on the national stage. And Dan Bongino talked about this one today, but obviously it's a story I've followed closely for years. But regarding Joe Biden, we had 3 major breakthroughs all being written about by the mainstream media this week. And, we had a whistleblower from the IRS stating that the Hunter Biden investigation was being stonewalled for political reasons. He had gone to I think both the DOJ and the IRS inspector generals, he said, and then he went and asked for whistleblower protection from House Republicans. Well, if he had to get whistleblower protection from House Republicans, that means the inspector generals once again didn't do diddly squat, and that's a bit of an issue. A couple other things broke on that story this week. Big stuff. What was it? I had it on the tip of my mind earlier, but there's like 3 of them. Like really damning stuff. And why is the mainstream media talking about it right now? Well, Bongino speculates it's because the Biden administration and his team had announced that he was going to make an announcement next week that he was on his 2024 ambitions, whether he's going to run or not. And it seems to me that there's some powers that be in DC, the deep state, that do not want Biden running again for a lot of reasons. But again,
let me say this real quick. One of their concerns is he makes them look bad. One of the big concerns is that, he kind of gets the people against him. Not that they're overly concerned, because there are things they do that make sure their thing happens. But nonetheless, there's still a certain element of favorability that they're looking for from the public. And I crack up at that attitude, because no matter who it is, they're going to look bad. All right, maybe he looks a little extra bad because he runs into walls and chases ice cream trucks, but still, and stiff hair, but still, no matter who they have, it's going to look bad because their policies fail. It's like, I used to tell my audiences this, these are the same people that have convinced themselves that it's possible to pick up a turd from the clean end. And then they go, oh gosh, how, he looks so bad. We'll just have to get somebody else in there. Your policies make them look bad. Your policies, what you do, are turds. Oh, well, we need to get someone else in there. It doesn't make it look any better, or at least not for more than a few weeks. But anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, but it's the same thing in Arizona. How much evidence is it going to take to actually get someone to move? And we've had more than enough evidence on Biden, since 2015 or before.
Sure.
They have SARs, suspicious activity reports from the banks. They have hundreds of these that actually show wire transfers coming from all sorts of countries with bad actors into people in the Biden's name. Who's the gentleman? James Comer, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, is running a committee, and basically he says they have an investigation into 9 Biden family members that have been receiving these payments. This is documented evidence, but again, what are they going to do about it? Now, right. I've always been against the idea of political impeachments. Bill Clinton was impeached for all the wrong reasons. That was a terribly weak case, and it politicized the process. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Trump impeachments were politicized. They had to make up reasons to impeach. Those are the worst things I've ever seen. But impeaching Joe Biden with a Republican House should be a no-brainer, not because he's ever going to be convicted in the Senate, but because the trial would be something everyone watched, and we could expose the corruption for the entire world to see. You see foreign countries moving away from America at a record, breakneck speed. They see what's going on. They know what happened, how Biden got into office. They know what these people are doing. They're the ones who did business with him. This is not a secret. But again, what institution here has the ability to hold these people accountable? And I answer that. The only optimistic hope I have is, the states and we the people are the only institutions that have that power. And we're seeing it play out in Missouri versus Biden, how state attorney generals actually have some power, and the courts aren't totally corrupt. So maybe that's the road. Maybe that's the roadmap.
Perhaps. Now, I'm going to shift gears here. I'm going to play something that I put on my website because when I saw it, it caught my attention. We're in got to be careful how I tread on this. We are in an age in which certain bodies and institutions have decided certain things are the way they are. To question it is wrong. To say, hey, that doesn't make sense is wrong. And to question science or something like else is wrong. And yet and then when we do, we get silent. So how do you deal with that? Well, yeah, I guess you got to prove your point, is the answer. Anyway, so with that in mind, I came across kind of a fun video, and I actually put it on my website. It's actually a YouTube short. And so I'm going to see if I can now, whoops, wrong button. See if I can do a share screen here. So hopefully you guys can hear it.
Well, he's doing that. Yeah, Tracy, he does make America look bad. But, the truth is America's foreign policy and domestic policy for decades has not been what we hold ourselves out to be, this beacon of freedom. And that's problematic. And it's our government.
You can see it. I took it, right?
Go ahead.
You can see my screen?
Hang on a minute. No, I can't see it yet. I'll let you know when I can see it.
So this behavioral pattern is only flowing downstream.
Can you hear it?
In the shock tube.
I can hear it. I can't see it.
Let's say you're right. I'm only human. I can make this. But our Asher Shapiro's textbook is inaccurate? Yes, sir, it's inaccurate. Oh, well then, why don't you write to Asher Shapiro? Tell him to correct.
Stop it. Go back to this right. Verify. Boom. Boom. Let's try again. Now, can you see it?
Not yet. I'll let you know when I can. Well, we got some dead air. What you doing something different?
Yeah, it's driving me nuts here because I want to share this so bad. And
once you text me the link, and I'll load it, and I'll do it on my end.
Text you the link,
or email it to me, or put it in the StreamYard chat, and I'll grab it. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can put it in the StreamYard chat, I guess. Copy. Yeah, for some reason, this is not wanting me to share. Maybe it's because I'm not the main guy.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. I've been able to do that too. But I've been demoing some other streaming platforms besides StreamYard.
Put it in the private chat.
Where's the private chat? There we go. I've actually been checking out some really cool software. It's the competitors to StreamYard, and there's some really neat stuff that's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
Just a great lesson in infallibility.
Mm-hmm.
That one.
I want that video to play.
I will play that for you momentarily. That's a political pistachio one. Okay, that's the one. Now you should be able to see my screen.
Yep.
You should be able to hear.
Excuse me?
So this behavioral pattern is only possible when the fluid is flowing downstream in the shock tube.
So, Nambi, let's say you're right. I'm only human. I can make mistakes. But are you saying Asher Shapiro's textbook is inaccurate?
Yes, sir, it's inaccurate.
Oh, well, then, why don't you write to Asher Shapiro? Tell him to correct it, according to you. He'll be very glad to hear from you, Numbu.
Okay, sir. Dear Mr. Nambi Narayanan, thank you very much for your letter. You're the first one to point out the printing and syntax error in my theorem in this version of the book. I'm surprised that it went unnoticed by the professors thus far, but all the same, I assure you it will be corrected. Thank you for pointing it out, and I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors, Mr. Numbu. From Asher Shapiro. You have a lovely day, sir.
What did I just see?
All right. So what we just saw was a very arrogant, smug professor who's teaching something, and he's teaching what the textbook says. And one of his students says, that's not right. It's inaccurate. And in a very smug response, well, then why don't you write him and tell him about his error? And what it should be according to you. And so he does. And it turns out it is an error. And he gets the letter back and saying, hey, thanks for pointing it out. I'm surprised the professors didn't notice it. That, to me, sums up kind of really well what we're going through. But there's all these errors. We're bringing them up, but they're too smug to recognize that it's possible. It's even remotely possible that some student or somebody that's not some academic can recognize the error and point it out.
Yeah, I've talked about this a bit, and in fact, I've done it at city council at a couple of school board meetings. And the issue here is what we call credentialism, where it's the numbers. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna tee you up here in a second because we have had this conversation. But credentialism is basically saying, oh, because you went to these schools for so long and have these little letters after your name, where MD, PhD, and stuff like that, you must be right, and someone who doesn't have those same credentials can't possibly be correct. And we saw that. How many times did you hear "trust the experts" during COVID? And the experts turned out to be wrong on every single thing. And these people, they're indoctrinated this belief in the institutions, the system, the government itself, that it can be infallible. We should be teaching our kids from day one, question everything the government does, question what the experts do, because they're wrong on everything from climate change. That's not according to the experts. They were wrong on COVID. They've been wrong on everything. How can intelligent people, well educated, be wrong on so many things? And so, Doug, let me ask you a question. How do you know so much about the Constitution? Are you a lawyer?
No, I'm not a lawyer. That's why I understand the Constitution.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right, Tracy. Trust the science. Now, and sometimes, hey, look, some of these people who go to school for a very long time are very, very smart. Some of them, but others just means they're really good at memorizing stuff and didn't have the I don't know what's the word, the guts to go out in the real world and put those put those ideas in motion to see how the markets actually took them. And our academic system is incredibly flawed, and it gets worse by the day. God, I saw the protests of who was it? Michael Knowles was going to actually speak in a debate.
Saw that.
It wasn't a speech; it was a debate, and his pro-transgender debate opponent actually came out with an article saying, "This is ridiculous. I was here to debate. I want you to let him speak. Let's have ideas aired in issue. Let's have ideas debated in a public forum." But we don't get that. We get shouted down and silenced because they know their ideas don't hold water. Did we ever have the debate on climate change, or did Obama just declare the science settled? Is science ever settled? Of course not. That's the definition of science. But they won't do this. They're intellectually dishonest. Their ideas don't hold water, which is why you see the credentialism, which is why we see the sensationalism, which is why we see all wokeism. It's not about debate. It's about emotion as opposed to reason and logic, and that is not a good basis to form a civilized society.
I spend time talking about that in one of the chapters of my book, Repeal Democracy, which I was going to bring up on my screen, but because I've got a show going on, my document program is not responding. This computer is getting to the point where it doesn't want to do more than one thing at once. I really need to replace it. But so since I don't have a copy of Repeal Democracy with me, I won't be able to go into it. But I spend the beginning of the
I have a copy right. I have a copy right here. If you want me to take me to the chapter.
All right. Well,
give me one.
Go to the chapter on secession.
Give me 1 second. I've actually got to walk away from the computer to do this, so bear with me.
Okay. So while he's gone, so what I'll say is, so what encouraged me to write the way I did in that chapter is because secession is an argument that I've gotten into half a dozen times with academics, people who have that alphabet after their name, because they're a professor or they've got a master's or a PhD in something. And I'm just a public high school diploma carrier, so I must not know anything about it. And so I actually spend time kind of arguing about the problem with credentialism. They get so caught up in what they've been taught by professors that when I bring up the original documents that I learned it from, they say, well, I'm not going to read some obscure document to, on this issue. Why? That's the people who created this stuff. That's them. Why are you saying that what your professor said is more important than what the founders said? I wish there was a way you could just stick that sucker on the screen, but for me to even read to people. But
which chapter which chapter am I looking for?
The one on secession.
Is that early on or later on? Okay, here I got it. Secession in the Civil War. Is that the one? Secession in the Civil War.
Yeah.
Page 187.
Yeah. All right, and in the beginning, if I remember properly in that book, I get into explain these discussions I've had with people with these alphabets after their name, this credentialism.
Is that the opening paragraph, or
that would be probably the second paragraph? But just take a look at it, see if that's what it's saying, and if it looks like what I'm saying, then I would love for us to.
It looks like you're talking about Federalist 45, whether it's in a voluntary union. I don't see anything. Okay, it's on the second page. Achieving academic and professional credentials, while it is important for those who have taken that road, is not the end-all, be-all when it comes to knowing the full context about the subjects a person may have studied. You mean there's such a thing as an autodidact? The education one receives in our learning institutions is an academic one that focuses on the mainstream accepted truths regarding whatever subject is being pursued. While the attainment of advanced degrees may place a person in an elite group of individuals, it doesn't mean that you know the full context regarding the subject studied. Well, that's pretty freaking true. You want me to continue?
Yeah, please.
This is Doug speaking. I don't have a degree. I am self-taught. I have delved into not only the academic arguments that are universally accepted by all of the elite academics, but I've also searched through the arguments that may not necessarily be embraced or championed by the academic community. I believe a well-rounded education must include more than what is thrown at someone by professors or professionals with peer-reviewed journal entries to their credit. There's more. Shall I go?
Please.
These quote-unquote credentialed academics are usually the folks who get the most upset about my discussions about secession. More often than not, they will argue that the founding fathers were against secession, that secession was the demon that led to nearly 700,000 Americans dying in a civil war. Oh, quote-unquote civil war. Thank you for putting the quotes on that. Over slavery and the argument over whether or not this country is a voluntary union or a firm union has been settled by court rulings and academic debates. But that's not what the history shows. And during the whole time, my well-educated adversary regarding secession is barking at me, usually refusing to let me get a word in edgewise because my puny, uneducated mind must not understand the full complexity of it all. They never considered that they are arguing against a point of view I never made, and a point of view I don't believe. Is that enough?
Yeah, and what I go on to say is the founding fathers didn't like secession. They're right, but that's not the point. The point is they didn't want secession, but they didn't say you couldn't have secession. You shouldn't, but not that you can't, because it's a voluntary union. Of course, they wanted a firmer union, but the problem is these academics, when they argue with you, if you disagree with them, then you must be the opposite extreme. So therefore, if they believe that secession is illegal, you must think that it should not only be legal, but it should be encouraged. And how is that good for the union? And then I go on to explain what I mean. Firmer union is what they were looking for, but they recognized they didn't want a totally firm union where the states could not leave. They didn't want them to. They wanted to present a union that was so attractive they wouldn't leave. But freedom still requires the states to have that ability, just like you should have that ability to do something else. Like
I was trying to go into image search to see if I could find a picture of the book, and it was pretty interesting. This is on my Brave search engine. So here's a lot of pictures of a younger Doug smiling. I'm going to scroll down a bit. There's a bunch more pictures. So the search is Douglas v. Gibbs, Repeal Democracy. I'm looking for the book, and I get down to, there's a few other pictures of people we know. Wait a minute. Who's this guy? Why am I showing up on a Douglas v. Gibbs search?
That's funny.
Yeah, it cracked me up. I had to share that one.
Yeah. Well, the book, if you want to purchase it and you can't find it, if you go to politicalpistachio.com, there on the right-hand side on the sidebar, right under my mug with a flag behind me and a Constitution behind me where it says the blog site of Douglas v. Gibbs, there's a caption that says Doug's latest book, Repeal Democracy. And if you click on the book, it'll go to the Amazon page. Getting it through Amazon, hopefully in the near future, will not be the only way you can get it online. I do have a store, but I'm shutting my store down because it's been nothing but a pain in the rear. But I am working with some people, and Brady is a part of this too, where I can get a better fulfillment center, better store, and all of that jazz. But right now, Amazon's the way to do it, or barnesandnoble.com. So Repeal Democracy. But once again, you go to Political Pistachio and you click the book, you can buy the book that way. But my point is, getting back to that video, I think that video is a great example. And you got to kind of pay attention to what's being said. But what's amazing to me is how in this video, I'm surprised that this is mainstream. How smug that professor is. How to a student, well, if you think there's a mistake kind of attitude. And I kind of get a kick out of that, but it really does show us what we're up against. we're up against a bunch of smug, arrogant interpreters who've interpreted everything to be what they mean. And how dare you have a thought that is different? And if you do, well, they've got all kinds of words for it: misinformation, disinformation, and so on and so forth. How dare you think differently? They couldn't possibly be wrong. And in this video, when the professor pulls that smug move on this student, and the professor challenges him, well, why don't you write the writer of the textbook? Tell him he's wrong according to you. He does. And it turns out he was right. It was wrong.
Well, and he's lucky enough to find the author was intellectually honest and was more concerned with getting the information correct and being perceived as correct.
Right.
And that's important. But no, it brings up that kind of leads into one of the other really fun conversations of dealing with this is,
okay,
quite often you'll be arguing, somebody, whether it be a leftist or a statist or, just one of those people who calls themselves a conservative, but lives inside an information bubble that doesn't want to understand the level of corruption we're dealing with because their official sources didn't say that. If the New York Times or Washington Post doesn't say it, it can't be true. And you'll bring them a source that's really well, some investigative journalist has written, done a really good job with the research. They've dotted their I's, they've crossed their T's, they've shown their sources. These people won't even read the article or watch the video because, oh, what's your source? It's on a list of blacklisted fake news, or what they call fake news. And it's been fact checked. Well, the fact checkers are, look who's paying the fact checkers. I mean, it all traces back to Soros.
Then the question comes up: are they wrong? Are they mistaken? Or are they playing that smug, arrogant game because they know they're full of it? They're lying, but they don't dare show their hand.
Well, that's their deflection. They don't have to read an opinion that differs from them because it's not on their approved list of sources. So you can never actually have the discussion. They will shoot the messenger rather than listen to the message every single time. So what I've been doing for years, because this always happens, the mainstream media lies a lot, but they surround it with about 90 to 95% truth, and then they spin it. So you can, if you know what to look for, you can find what they said 3 or 4 years ago, one of their trusted sources, and then show it to them and say, look, these people agreed. And my favorite example is the Ukraine war. These people are all celebrating Zelensky, the brave hero, and these brave Ukrainians. And yet since 2014, when the U.S. State Department staged that coup, there was 8 years of articles from New York Times to CNN to Time talking about the Nazi problem of the Azov battalion. They talked about this stuff because they were reporting some truth. They didn't realize it would be politically sensitive in the future. So you can find ways to use their sources against them, but you got to be able to be really good at searching and researching and also really good at archiving. That's how I've won a lot of debates and gotten a lot of red pills, because I will use their sources and say, look, your own source said this.
I've done that too as well. And actually, when I write my books, I first go out of my way to try to find either a media outlet that is quote unquote allied with my opposition, or physical book sources that are by persons that are considered literary giants, or at least literarily trustworthy. And then more often than not, I make sure I have a copy of that source. So if ever there's a question on whether or not that the source exists, I can say, yeah, it does. Here it is. But and I appreciate you reading that little bit from my book. And then, it's funny because I've written all these books, but I don't have any of them in my office. Maybe I should have a section right here, just those. But
well, I told you I was going to read that book pretty soon, so you got me started now.
Well, now that I got you to read a part, you went, "Hey, that's not too bad. Maybe I should read this thing."
so for the audience, it's funny. Doug's a great writer, and I'm gonna read all his books at some point in time. But there's a lot of other books. I got a stack of books I need to read, and Doug's keep getting pushed back. And the reason is very simple. We talk to each other so much that there's going to be some new stuff in each book. It's like it's almost, some of it's going to be repetitive for me.
And I would say that my first 5 or 6 books, we've talked about just about everything in them. My textbook on government, Creator, and will probably be a lot of what we talked about. There'll be a lot of new stuff. The only one where I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment and something purely that you haven't read yet will be Repeal Democracy in my history book I'm writing, and perhaps The 7 Worst Constitutional Liars.
My father enjoyed Creator. I think he probably, I know he's most of the way through it about a month or so ago when I talked to him.
Okay.
But I gave that to him, and he was enjoying it.
All right, very good.
So, Tracy has an interesting question in the chat. She goes, I'll tell you something really scary. A good friend of mine told me once that we should rewrite the entire Constitution because it's outdated. I was dumbfounded. This is going to be a fun little conversation. First of all, principles are never outdated. The idea that we must protect ourselves from an overbearing government will never be outdated. The nature of mankind will never be outdated. And that's what we're talking about. It's, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But if we did have the opportunity, Doug, you and I, to sit down and rewrite the Constitution, we wouldn't do it. We would repeal a few amendments and then rephrase a bunch so they can no longer be misinterpreted.
For clarification, right.
So I turn this over to you, and I'll fill in what you miss. Which of the, say, 3 or 4 things need to be rephrased just so it can no longer be misinterpreted?
Before I do that, one of the things that I was going to put on the back of my truck is someone gave it to me, this great big giant, not really a bumper sticker, but of that nature, was huge. And it has the Constitution. It says at the top, the Constitution does not need to be rewritten. And then underneath it says it needs to be reread. So it's funny you bring that up, because I literally broke the engine of my truck weeks before I put that on there. So luckily I now have to wait until I have a new vehicle to put it on. But when it comes to the Constitution, people, say to me all the time, well, you act like the Constitution is divine. There's nothing wrong with it. No, there's plenty wrong with it. All of them are amendments. and what isn't amendments is a misinterpretation of what was originally intended. But the Constitution itself, the first 7 articles and those first 12 amendments, there's nothing wrong there. It's just a matter of interpretation. In the sense of what would I get rid of? I would definitely get rid of
16 and 17.
16 and 17 for sure. Probably also 26, which moved the voting age to 18. And I tell my classes this, think about this for a second. During the time of the founding fathers, the average age to get into Harvard and Yale was 13. Nearly all of them had read the entire Bible by the time they were 5. Fisher Ames had read it by the time he was 3. Yet, they still believed you should not be able to vote until you're 21. Think about that for a second.
Well, the human brain, especially in men, I think women are a few years ahead of us, doesn't fully develop until the age of 24 or 25.
Right.
Now, you're still intellectually developing. You also have no experience or wisdom whatsoever. I mean, I knew everything when I was 21 until I looked back and said, God, I was an idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the reason you see one particular party wants to keep lowering the voting age, because when your mind's not fully developed, you're more impressionable. And therefore, you are subject to believe in bad ideas that are based on emotion and not logic or reason. That's why you see that.
And I was telling a group today, I was in a meeting with earlier today, that when you remove reason and virtue, what you have left is an animal. That's what they're doing. They're eliminating virtue, moral standard, God, all that stuff, and reason, critical thinking. And what you get are animals, because that's all that's left. What separates us from the animal world is our ability to reason and our belief systems.
That's
what separates us from the animal world. And then we see images in Chicago of these animals doing what they're doing, or these people in different places that are fighting and acting like animals. Well, right, because you took away the reason and the virtue. All that's left is animal instinct.
It's a valid point. The before you jump into how we would restate certain clauses that have been misinterpreted over the years, we just mean clarify the language, because people speak differently now than they did then. Words have a little bit different meaning, and they need to be clarified. Otherwise, the court systems are going to completely bastardize the meaning to do something that allows the government or the state to once again, do things they weren't supposed to do. And I think the thing I would do is, what's my saying? Make the enumeration doctrine great again. It was implied, it was discussed, it was known, everyone unanimously believed it, that the enumeration doctrine, meaning only the powers that were specifically enumerated to the federal government were theirs, and all the rest were left to the states. It got restated in the 10th Amendment. But the original 7 articles didn't lay that out clearly enough that somehow the government's been able to ignore that principle and seize power it was never intended to have. And they did so because of a couple of misinterpretations, which Commerce Clause and necessary and proper. And I'm going to turn that over to you to address those if you'd like.
Yeah, I definitely believe that a clarification, explanation, language providing for the enumeration doctrine, even clearer than the 10th Amendment, should be added. I'm also a firm believer that before each of the amendments in the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, I think they fouled up when they decided to put Congress shall make no law only at the beginning of the First Amendment. I believe all 10 of them should begin with the words Congress shall make no law. And then once again, later on or earlier on in the Constitution, somewhere say, by Congress shall make no law, we mean, and then explain. When it comes to, what was talking about earlier, just compensation, spell it out. When it comes to the word regulate does not mean federal law, regulations, and control and taxation. It means to put in good order. Therefore, for the government to regulate something, that means it has no duty towards it unless it's not in good order. Then its duty is to put it in good order, not to control it.
And we've talked about this before, but we'll do it again because it's topical. I've made the argument that the Bill of Rights, at least amendments 1 through 8, are redundant.
Sure, they are,
because the government those powers to restrict free speech or make a law restricting free speech, make a law of gun control. The federal government was never given those powers according to the enumeration doctrine. If they weren't given those powers, they don't have them. And I'll use my analogy of the pie, because everything's about power. Mm-hmm. If all power is in a pie, what we did is we sliced off a couple little slices for the federal government, and we said, okay, you can handle international affairs, foreign affairs, and you can handle interstate disputes. And pretty much the rest of it, it's hands off. And what the government's done for the last 240 years is they've dominated, taking the rest of the pie. And I want my pie back.
Pretty much. And when it comes to this stuff also, I think that there needs to be some clarifying language regarding rights. We really don't know what it means. We've allowed them to define what rights are and what the government's role regarding rights are. The Declaration of Independence and clues in things that we've read from people like John Locke and Jefferson and so on and so forth gives us ideas, but it was never really spelled out. And when I spell it out, usually people are kind of shocked, but it makes sense to them. What's government's job when it comes to your rights? And we've been convinced that their job is to protect those rights and to guarantee those rights. But their job when it comes to our rights is nothing. What I mean by that is you do nothing. You don't interfere with them. The only time government has any role regarding our rights is when our rights clash. I've got a right to go through the intersection. He has a right to go in the intersection. We bumped into each other in the process. Now government has to get involved, find out whose fault it was, what needs to be done, where the economical payments will come from to fix it and all of that jazz. Until then, and our rights for the most part are not another business. Now, if as consent to the governed and as we decide there should be some rules established or laws established regarding our rights so that we're not running into each other. Like, hey, how about let's put up stoplights? That way we don't run into each other for a more orderly exercise of our rights. Government could do that if we ask them to, but that's the extent. And the way I like to answer this a little bit more so is from the Declaration of Independence. What does it say in the Declaration about our rights? First of all, that we're endowed with them by our Creator. So first of all, they're God-given. They're natural. Or as Devil Dog says in the chat, our rights are by nature. Absolutely. So you naturally have them. They're part of the natural order of things. And God gave them to you. And there are certain ones that are enumerated in the Constitution, but not all of them. And when it comes to your rights, not only are you endowed by your Creator, and they're unalienable, can't be removed from you. You can't give them away. No one can take them from you. Among them, and this is what's key, among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Notice it doesn't say life, liberty, and happiness. It doesn't say just life, liberty, and property. And I know that's kind of a sore spot for you, but I like the way it got written because it really, really opens up what it's about. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not happiness, pursuit of happiness. You don't have a right to property. You don't have a right to happiness. You don't have a right to be happy. You don't have a right to health care. You don't have a right to education. You have a right to pursue it. Government has decided you have a right to it and they must provide it at somebody else's expense. And I'm saying, no, their job is to put no obstacles, make no law, do nothing regarding those rights so that you can access them on your own to pursue them. And a great example I like to use is, you don't have the right to education, you have a right to pursue it. So there's educational institutions out there. You're working on which one you want to pursue. Government's not supposed to make a law that's going to interfere with your ability to pursue that or make a choice. That's none of their business. You don't have a right to health care. You have a right to pursue it. They're not supposed to make laws that's going to interfere with that pursuit. Their job is to do nothing so that you may pursue your health care. My favorite, because people get it, is you don't have a right to have a cake baked exactly the way you want, but you have a right to pursue it. And if that baker says, hey, that's not a product I offer, it's not government's job to get involved. It's none of their business. Okay, thanks. Do you know any bakers that might? Hey, that guy up there might. Okay. I'm going to go pursue it. I'm pursuing my happiness. I want my cake. Government's not supposed to force you to give me that product. If you don't make that product, fine. I will pursue it until I find my cake because I want my cake. I have a right to pursue it. And government's not supposed to get in the way of me pursuing. They're not supposed to say, oh, there's a law where you're not allowed to make that kind of cake. No. Government's supposed to get, and I believe in liberty, even if I disagree with that cake. But if somebody wants to offer it and you want to buy it, there's a market, knock yourself out. Now, of course, there's going to be a handful of things in life that are deadly to people, like certain drugs or whatever, where we want to have laws. I get that. But in a general sense, government's job when it comes to our rights is hands off. Let us pursue our happiness. Let us pursue our rights. It's not your job to protect our rights. It's not your job to guarantee our rights. It's our job to pursue our rights and your job to get out of the way so I can.
So you kind of teed me up for one of my favorite arguments, and I know you're gonna have some fun with it because we always do. But when Thomas Jefferson wrote about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he was paraphrasing something written almost 100 years earlier by John Locke, who wrote about life, liberty, and property. Now, I've made the argument that had Jefferson used the word property instead of pursuit of happiness, then the entire World Economic Forum's Great Reset, when they start talking about equity and what's the word they use, stakeholder, would lose all power because property would actually be enforced by the Constitution. And you couldn't say, well, I don't actually have any stake, I don't actually have a share of the property, but I've got a stake because I'm adjacent to it. So that's been one of my pet peeves. And if that had been in there, we could have destroyed the whole stakeholder capital argument from day one. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So my solution now is it should have been life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. But they had to have only three.
The fear in the writing of that, when Jefferson's writing of that, was that people would think that they were entitled to government given property, and they wanted to make sure that didn't become.
But okay, so that brings up another thing. Your rights don't come from the government. The government exists to secure your rights.
Sure,
and that needs to be clarified.
And absolutely.
Getting
back to what we would do if we could
rewrite, we could re-clarify a lot of these points.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a few more like the 14th Amendment. I mean, we could do an entire. Well, we could do about 10 shows.
Shoot. That's a whole hour and a half.
No, that's probably
on its own.
that's probably more than that. That's probably a book we ought to co-write at some point. Maybe we'll do a series on that. Now you know who I love, who's written really well about that is our good friend Brian McClanahan.
Mm-hmm.
He's the book we both read. He nailed that one in those couple of chapters better than anyone else has.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Finally got that thing done. By the way, good book.
Yeah, it is. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That was probably the best book I read last year.
It's only because you never got around to reading any of mine. All right. Not that I have any ego or anything. All
right, we're coming up about the 1 hour mark. You got anything else you want to touch on?
No, but I think we touched on a couple of really good things. I reiterated one at the beginning of the show, as I'm being told by the War Hamster, but I'm glad I did because I kind of brought a few new things to that discussion. We talked about a few other things. Now, and in the near future, just Brady and I doing things. We're gonna, you're gonna see a couple of them pop up. We're not quite there yet. We're almost there. We are planning on doing some joint projects. We'll see how that works out. I also have the potential of a Friday night Constitution class coming up. I don't know when it's going to start yet. And once it does, that class will take priority because it's, for lack of a better way of putting it, going to make me some income. And so I either will have to bow out of this program on Friday nights, or we'll have to adjust its time on the air live, one or the other. I'm guessing it'll be in the first. But
and I've been told by the lady hamster that Thursday nights, me being always at Constitution class in person and probably zooming in once I move, Friday nights on this show, having Saturday nights free, and then Sunday nights on Alan's show is probably a little bit too much of my weekend spent doing this stuff and not enough with her. She makes a good argument, so I will probably not be doing many more Friday night shows either. That being said, Doug and I are looking at either a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday live show coming up. And also, I think we need to talk about doing a morning show one of these days. And I think that's going to have to happen, especially with me going to the East Coast. So you'll just have to set your alarm. It's kind of weird. I've spent my whole professional career living on an East Coast time zone where basically the stock market opens at 9:30. So I've got to be in the office at 6:15 Pacific. And to go to the other coast and actually be able to get up in the morning, relax, work out, even swim some laps before the market even opens, that's going to be really, really nice. It'll be different because I'll be staying up later at night. Starting a show at 8 o'clock at night is not something I really look forward to doing. But that being said, there's going to be some good adjustments and some interesting ones.
We're not sure what his mental state is yet, Devil Dog. Oh, you meant State in the Union. Never mind.
Oh, my mental state. I'm walking on clouds these days. No, I'm gonna be moving out to New Hampshire for the summer, and we'll take a couple trips down to Florida, where we're gonna settle, probably by early fall. And I think we're looking at the Destin area, right around Miramar Beach. And but we're gonna check it out first before we're not gonna make any concrete decisions.
Yeah. Bill says you have to compromise somewhere in the middle, like North Carolina.
Yeah. Hey, that was actually considered. That was discussed. It didn't quite make it to the final vote, though. I got vetoed on that, buddy.
I am supposed to be in Washington, D.C. in July, more than likely, and one of my stops is going to be Chattanooga along the way. So I won't be too far away. I don't know. Just saying. Maybe we can, find a way to shoot on over to North Carolina at one point. Really depends on a few factors. If I don't do it in July, I will do it hopefully in October. My plan in October is because I've got a bunch of groups that want me to speak. I plan to hopefully hit Michigan because Stephanie, who's usually in this chat room, wants me out there, and she's talking late September or October. And I would like to also hit the Carolinas and Virginia for some groups, and also because I've not been to the Carolinas, believe it or not. I've been to every state except for 8 of them, and the 2 Carolinas are among that list I've not been to yet.
Yeah, I've actually touched bases with Stephanie because when I move across the country, I am going to drive to Michigan to meet the lady hamster there. She'll be vacationing with her family, so I get to get thrown into the fire.
Oh, she has family in Michigan?
She's from there originally, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting coinkadink.
Yeah, so I'll be driving there, and I am going to take the time to have dinner or lunch with Stephanie. And
Very
so
cool.
I'm not going to be far from there. And
all right. Well, when you guys do that, you got to call me and video me into so I can say hi and all that. So I'll be jealous I'm not there.
No, absolutely. Sounds like they're doing some good things in Michigan. That's an important state to turn back towards the red side.
I think it is already, but I digress.
Yeah, that's another.
Then I got to talk about things that might get me thrown off certain channels and.
Well, I finally got. I don't know if this chat knows this, but I finally got my first strike on YouTube for our Sunday night. I might have mentioned there were issues with a certain process of selecting our leaders, and I got a strike and got suspended for a week from YouTube for our Sunday night show on my War Hamster channel. I just started throwing my videos up on YouTube just to see how far I could push it, and I finally found out. I don't like using YouTube that much for the obvious reasons, but and I think I have 40 followers there. They're not going to be that disappointed.
Yeah.
And the problem is we have that issue with Rumble uploading this week. I think it's been fixed, but I got to get that video.
One of my videos went up, the other one hasn't, so I'm still trying to work on that other one, getting it up.
Exactly right, Tracy. We called it a badge of honor. It's hey, if you're not getting a strike on YouTube, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I've had so far I have had 4 of them, one on each of the YouTube channels that I'm on. As for where we would be going in Michigan for Devil Dog's sake, because he says he's there, we would be like northwest of Lansing, kind of getting closer to what's that city up there? Grand Rapids, is it? So that's where we would probably be when we visit our allies in that area. So Devil Dog, maybe we'll figure it out and make sure everybody gets together. We'll see. Because
we're all going to get together at the victory party when this mess is all over.
Yeah, very good.
That'll be in Florida.
Yeah, I doubt it, but okay.
I'll pay for your flight.
Well, by then I expect to have a nice big new truck. So
you better have it by then. This victory's not happening anytime soon. And that's I'll leave a parting thought with this. I get asked all the time. People that really know what's going on, they understand just how bad government has become and just how much the oppression is. They go, how does this end? I go, I don't know. I don't know when it ends. I go, things will get worse before they get better.
Well, let me give you guys then some optimism, not hopium, optimism. And I've been bringing this up kind of to groups lately because people say, yeah, but Doug, there's just no chance for this and no chance for that. And I said, are you kidding me? We got 2 great examples in 2014. In 2014, one of those things was a particular ranch, and I don't know if we'll get shut down for it or not. I'm talking about it, but Bundy Ranch there, where there was a standoff, Bundy Ranch standoff. And what happened? When a bunch of patriots came in solidarity, federal government backed down. Now, granted, there was some litigation afterwards, and certain people had to serve some time, but it was a success because the thing is, the opposition in actuality are cowards. The other one happened a little bit after that in Marietta, where I live. And we wound up getting national attention because what started happening is they were busting 187 illegals in per day for a facility that can handle 24 people for 72-hour processing. And actually, they weren't doing it per day. They were sending them 2 or 3 times a week. But we, in solidarity, it began with like 6 of us. I was part of the original 6, and it got 12. And then we wound up protesting in front of the immigration location facility. Before we knew it, we had hundreds of people. We're getting national attention. And I'm doing all kinds of TV. I was on Fox like 5 times, and Al Jazeera America and NPR and all kinds of, One American News. That was the first time I was on that. And I was on their station once later after that, different situation. But, and what happened? Eventually, we got the buses to turn around and stop showing up. The cowards backed down. And that's my point, is when we stand in solidarity, there's no limit to what we can do. The problem is they're the ones with the hive mind. Solidarity is hard for us for some reason. We better get over that. I'm not saying we need to have a hive mind, but we better figure out how to work together in solidarity better.
Yeah, we can't even define what a conservative means or what they're trying to conserve at this point in time. So we got some work to do. But
yeah.
I'll give you another example of why things are actually moving our direction. I saw a really nice infographic that went through basically that showed all 50 states and what their concealed carry or various gun laws were from like 1970 to today. And we just watch it happen year after year after year. More and more states have been opening up their gun laws to be more constitutional for 50 years straight. I mean, the trend is unmistakable. So that's happening. That's been going on for 50 years. And the left recognizes this, which is why their gun control stuff now is at a panic level. And that's why they're sending the transgender community to fight this battle for them. That's their cannon fodder. They're making this issue number one. The Tennessee 3. Let's not even get into that. But there's other things that are happening. The state election laws are better today than they were in 2020. They're not there yet, but it's going to be harder to pull shenanigans. I can give you dozens of examples of why things are getting better, not worse. Red states are gaining electoral votes, due to the census, people leaving the blue states. That's happening. Me being a case in point. So things are getting better, and that's why the left's pulling some of the panic stuff they're doing. They are scared. They understand.
And I do believe we're going to get control of certain processes, which we were talking about earlier. And I believe that Arizona is going to be one of the states leading that charge.
And we'll see. We got a lot of work to do, though. The enemy is certainly formidable.
Oh, absolutely. And we gotta understand that the enemy that we're against is greater than just what we see in the material world.
Yeah.
Now, we're in a spiritual war, and I recognize that. But I also know that God is one. I don't know what his will is, but if his will is revival and victory, I'm more than happy to help usher that in.
And to finish off my thought on that is, I don't know when or how this ends, but what I do know, sometimes the journey is the destination. And everybody listening to us, all of our regular subscribers, people like you and me and all the people we know, we were all given a choice. Do you stand against tyranny, or you just ignore and pretend it doesn't happen? And every single one of us answered the call. And I've never been more proud.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Well, and we see it in a smaller microcosm out here in Southern California with these classes. And the class in Carlsbad, which is no longer the class in Carlsbad, it's now going to be the class in Oceanside real soon. That group alone is a great microcosm of what we've got going for us in this country. Surely that what we are seeing with that group is not unique. Surely these types of gatherings, camaraderie, for lack of a better way of saying it, is something that is throughout the country. Once again, it gets back to what I said earlier. How do we capitalize on that? How do we create the solidarity we need? Because as individuals, we have our own individual thoughts. We tend to bicker individually and so on and so forth. And that's a wonderful thing that we are individuals. But we better get our collective you-know-what together, because the enemy is like a beehive. They've got one thing on their mind, one way of doing it, and one way of going after you. And they're all like-minded, and they don't care what the consequences are as long as they get their way. And we better be aware that this is not just a political disagreement. This is something more. I'll just be careful how I want to say that.
Doug, they're worse than bees. They are murder hornets.
They are murder hornets or the Borg.
You remember that hype in 2020, the murder hornets? We're all going to die from that one. I mean,
yeah, I remember that.
It's one of my favorite examples of the government always wanting to keep us scared.
Well, tyranny rules with fear.
Absolutely. And we win with hope and integrity
and truth
and a value system that matters. Anyways, I'm just wanted to share that I'm proud of every single one of us because we decided to say not just no, but hell no, not on our watch. So maybe I don't live to see the end of this, but I will walk the path.
As for the chat talking about trucks, now that I've revealed that my truck blew its engine about 6 weeks ago, something like that. And mine was weird. My type of truck doesn't do that kind of thing, but mine did. It's a Toyota. Yes, I drive a race fuel type thing. I gotta be careful, I guess, there too, or I'm gonna be some racist bastard or something. But nonetheless, yes, I don't buy American. I've always liked Toyotas, and I have a Toyota Pre-Runner, jacked up, big tires. Not super huge, but it's a nice truck. But between the 2 weeks of me checking fluids, because I was checking my fluids about once every couple of weeks, a crack. Now that we're looking into or figuring out what happened, a crack had formed at the top of my radiator. And then while I was driving slowly, I was losing fluid, didn't realize it until finally it got to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore. Suddenly my truck makes a noise, steam's coming up, and my needle goes from normal to red, shuts down, head gasket, cracked head, all the electronics and computer stuff under the hood is fried. I mean, it's just a mess.
See, you're actually lucky. My lemon of a BMW doesn't have the guts to actually break down and be totaled. It just keeps sort of breaking down just to the point where I got to spend $5,000 to repair it, but could stay on the road. Had like 4 years ago when that whole trend started, had it just had a irreconcilable, unfixable thing, I would have been so much further ahead financially. But the thing, my lemon is worse than yours. And I've got to.
Does it smell like rice wine when it's running? Devil dog. Yeah, you're my kind of Marine. All right.
Take us home, Doug. Get us out of here.
Take us home. United we stand. Combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Thanks for spending the time with us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. You can find me at douglasvgibbs.com and politicalpistachio.com. And then Brady has his own places. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, you guys all know where to find me already. But for the people who aren't here in the chat, best place to find me is Brady Fox on Rumble. That's FOXX. Or War Hamster and War_Hamster on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, and Twitter. Cheers, everyone. Have a great weekend.